Well, good morning and welcome everyone to the Detroit Regional Chamber continuing town house surveys series on COVID-19. Today we'll be talking about Operation Warp Speed. I'm sure you're seeing a lot in the news about it, but we want to give you an opportunity to hear from someone who's right here at home with us normally, doing another job, so that you can get good information direct from her. But before I do start that, I just want to remind everyone that you do have the opportunity to submit questions, and it is on the right-hand side of your screen. We will try to get to as many as we can, but I have to tell you, sometimes we can't get through them all, but we'll try to do our best. But I'm really excited today to be able to introduce you to Marion Whicker, who is the Chief of Supply, Production, and Distribution for Operation Warp Speed. In this role, she oversees and coordinates efforts to expand and ramp up manufacturing, ensures the procurement of the necessary equipment and supplies, and leverages new and existing partnerships to assist in the vaccine delivery. She was selected for this temporary position based on her 30+ years of defense and logistics experience and operations right here in Southeast Michigan. Normally she would be performing the role of executive director at the U.S. Army Tank-automotive and Armaments Command, which we all know is TACOM. And if you don't know about TACOM, this is another opportunity for you today to learn more about what's right here in our backyard. In addition to my role as the Chief Operating Officer of the Detroit Regional Chamber, I also am very proud to serve as Civilian Aide to Secretary of the Army for Michigan. This gives me the opportunity to work closely with a lot of our Army operations, but specifically with TACOM and the Ground Vehicle Systems Center located right in Warren. Thousands and thousands of employees and billions of dollars of procurement happens right there in our backyard. And Marion is responsible for a lot of that, moving a lot of that around. But I'm going to stop talking. I could talk forever because I'm very proud of them. But I want to introduce you to Marion Whicker. And Marion, I'm hoping that maybe you will start out just giving an overview of Operation Warp Speed and a little bit more about your role there.
Great. Thanks, Tammy. Thanks for having me, and welcome to everybody that's joining us. So Operation Warp Speed is the presidential effort, the U.S. government's effort to bring 300 million vaccines to the American public, to be able to vaccinate everybody that wants to have a vaccine. It is the combined effort of scientists, the CDC, the Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Defense, all of these organizations brought together to help develop the vaccines, manufacture the vaccines, and then in turn distribute and administer the vaccines in a safe and effective way. And that's really the biggest thing I want to emphasize is safety and effectiveness, because that's one of the concerns that people have is how are you going to take something that is normally about an 84-month process and cull it down to less than a year? That's the first question I would ask. That's the first question my family asks me all the time. And it's very simply this. It is the scientists have been working on this for a long time. Part of the vaccines are actually using technology that was delivered years ago, and they're just building on that. But you've got everything being done in parallel rather than sequentially. So if you think about, waiting for a vaccine to be approved and then starting to manufacture it and then starting to distribute it, all of that takes time. But when you have the ability and the support of the United States government to do it all in parallel, it's enabled us to do it at a much faster rate. However, there is no spare to safety or effectiveness of this vaccine, and that's that's the biggest concern for people. So I always want to make sure that I highlight that. What we're doing right now is really four main components. We're supporting the clinical trial. So when you think about in Southeast Michigan, Henry Ford Hospital proudly was doing one of the clinical trials and actually has led the way for our minority populations across all of the sites to be able to help and determine what vaccines are effective. So we work with the clinical trials to make sure we help them get set up, help them get the facilities they need, any equipment they need, and then we move on to manufacturing. So when we took over with Warp Speed, a lot of the manufacturing capabilities simply didn't exist. We've taken shells of buildings, we've built them out so that the manufacturing can go on right now while we're testing out the vaccines. And then the distribution. So we've taken what the CDC had for a distribution network, and if you think about it, just kind of put it on steroids. We helped expand it and make it more capable. But a lot of this is driven by the CDC. I want to make sure that that's well known. There's a misnomer that the Army's rolling in or DOD's rolling in and we're going to distribute vaccine in green trucks. We are not. We have a central distribution contract with a company called McKesson, and McKesson will be the distribution. We have great partners with UPS and FedEx who will be flying it around the country. And I'm sure people are going to have questions. Well, what's that going to do with my Christmas packages when we're flying vaccines around? Quite honestly, UPS and FedEx have already looked at all of that, and there will be no impact to Amazon Prime deliveries or any of those things that we all look forward to this time of the year. And then getting the vaccines out down to the American people. That's going to be the biggest challenge, is vaccine hesitancy, and rightfully so. There's a lot of people that were concerned at the speed at which this was done. And so we're going to ask the American people to have a big trust in what we're doing here. And I know as we do communiques like this, and so Tammy, I can't thank you enough. This will only help arm the American people with the information they need to then make informed decisions. What you do with a vaccine is going to be a personal choice. We all understand that, and we all respect it. Our goal here at Warp Speed is doing appearances like this, is to help get the information out so people can make then informed decisions. So I'll pause there and start with whatever questions you might have.
Yeah, so what I think would be important is, because it's very timely, you mentioned the CDC and their role. There's a very important meeting taking place today. Can you talk about that?
There is. It's called ACIP, ACIP. It's the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. And what happens is two parts to the vaccines getting approved. So we're going, Pfizer is going under what's called an emergency use authorization. Normal vaccines would go under what's called a BLA, a biologics license agreement. But under a pandemic, Pfizer's requesting an emergency use authorization. So the FDA, independent panel, will look at all of the data and science and everything associated with it. What the ACIP committee does is look at who should the vaccines be administered to first. So we've all heard on the news and open source, whether it's going to be healthcare workers, first responders, the elderly. And so that's what ACIP does. It's an independent body made up of doctors and medical professionals that will also look at the data and then make recommendations as to how that's going to transpire. So we're all waiting with bated breath as well. That's going to drive the part of the distribution strategy. But whatever ACIP comes up with, Operation Warp Speed and all of the people work on the vaccine, we will be ready to distribute vaccines once approved to the American public. Another good thing yesterday, so Moderna, the second vaccine, has also filed for their emergency use authorization. So what you're going to have is two vaccines just a couple weeks apart, buying to get approval and then out into the American public. So from an exciting perspective, the fruits of many months of labor, we're starting to see the end line.
Can you talk about the rate of production of the vaccines? For example, how many will be available when the vaccine is rolled out, and then how many more after that? How will that continue to flow?
Sure. So right now we have two vaccines that have requested emergency use authorization. When you look at both of them, about 20 million doses a month. So with Pfizer, just under 20 million, and then Moderna should have just right around 20 million for December, and then each month, 20 million more each month. Now, and we bought right now 100 million doses of both, but there's also 4 other vaccines in various states. 2 other vaccines are currently in clinical stage 3 trials, which means they're getting near the end. One is Janssen, which is Johnson & Johnson, and then also AstraZeneca. So potentially shortly into the new year, probably late January, early February, we'll see 2 more vaccines coming in. That will increase the production. And then we have 2 more vaccines that are in getting ready to go into stage 3 clinical trials. So an exciting time for us. The US government invested in 6 different vaccines to make sure that we really kind of hedged our bets, if you will, to get vaccines coming to the American public.
You know, there's always a lot of questions I hear daily, and we see it on the news, obviously, is, you know, who will be the priority to receive the vaccines?
Right.
And I know some of that's going to be based on what the CDC decides, but I think there's been some recommendations. Can you at all talk about where you think the priorities are going to lie when it comes to who gets the vaccines first?
So that's what ACIP is going to talk about today. So that ACIP
Right.
meeting will do that. You know, if you're listening to the news and you think about the healthcare workers and being the most prone because they're treating all of our people, there's certainly a school of thought that believes that the healthcare workers could and should go first, as well as our first responders. I know that the ACIP will be looking very strongly at our long-term healthcare facilities too, for both the workers as well as the people living in those facilities. So I think when you think about the first groups, it's really a combination of those 2 groups. Now, the great thing about the vaccines, the 2 vaccines, the efficacy, so how effective it is very high across all populations. You know, sometimes you may get a vaccine that's more has more efficacy for an older population, but these 2 vaccines seem to almost mirror each other in terms of their effectiveness. So that's a great problem to have,
Right.
in terms of being able to then identify what target audiences to prioritize.
So let's talk about, you know, once the FDA approves the emergency application. So let's start with Pfizer, which would then be Moderna after that. But
right.
The Army is so good at logistics, and that's why you're doing this. That's why you've been tapped. General Perna was asked to lead this. Talk about the logistics of what happens as soon as the FDA approval comes through.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. So right after FDA approval and pending the ACIP, then their final approval, we will start pushing vaccines to the designated sites. So Michigan, of course, my home state, they've already identified in their planning 5 major sites that have ultra cold freezers that they will do that first tranche of distribution out of. So if you can think about it, as soon as FDA says go, we have an approval, we will start pushing the vaccines to the respective sites. So state of Michigan, I actually happened to look it up, between both the Pfizer and Moderna, they should get about, I think it's 600,000 or 700,000 doses. And then those will be pushed out, and then the governor and the state immunization health officers will then work the distribution of it according to their plan.
And
so then, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, please, no, you please continue. Yeah. I'm sorry.
So then, depending on what ACIP came out with the prioritization, then the government and the state health officer would then distribute according to how it's prioritized. So if it was essential workers, they would take those first doses and prioritize the essential workers. Now, one of the things that I didn't mention, and I hope everybody's tracking, is the vaccines are in 2 doses. So for the Pfizer vaccine, you'll get your first dose. 21 days later, you would come back and get a second dose. Now, it's important that whatever vaccine you get for the first dose, you have to get the same one for the second dose. You wouldn't want to mix a Pfizer and a Moderna. Now, the Moderna vaccine will be 28 days apart.
Can you talk, I think this will be interesting to people besides, you know, health systems or employers to administer the vaccine. Operation Warp Speed has also set up lots of very, very accessible local areas for people to get the vaccine. Can you talk about some of those that you've already lined up?
So some of your larger hospitals will be doing that, and again, based on the priorities, and so they'll be doing that. The pharmacies will be working in partnership with the different what we call jurisdictions to help administer to long-term healthcare facilities. Should a state want to opt into that? So that'll be the working mechanism early up front. So if you think about it, while vaccine isn't as plentiful, we will push it to sites that the states have designated. When vaccine becomes more plentiful, that's when you'll see it in your Walmarts, your Walgreens, your CVS's, and all of those places. And so as we get into that, more and more vaccine, as we talked about early on, end of January, February, that's when you'll see it become more local. So in the initial push where vaccine is less plentiful, the jurisdictions really make their own decisions as to where they want to push it to and how they want to push it out.
All right. Yeah, that's really, really important. So when we talk about the importance of having 2 doses, and really that is going to be critical if we're going to get ahead of this pandemic. Can you talk about the plan to track and encourage people to make sure they get their second dose in the time frame they should?
Absolutely, Tammy. So one of the things that we're doing, and a little segue to it, is in addition to the United States government providing the vaccines, we're also providing that ancillary kit. So all of the needles and syringes, face masks, face shields, alcohol wipes. You know, one of the challenges in our state early on was PPE. So when Warp Speed was founded, that was certainly one of the mandates was we weren't going to have jurisdictions, states, trying to buy and get their own PPE. It was going to be provided. So within that box of PPE that will accompany the vaccine is a vaccine registration card. So when Tammy Carnrike gets her vaccine, she'll be handed a card, an old school paper card that says what day you came in, what vaccine you got, and when you're due 21 days later. Now, we recognize that people may lose that card, so we encourage them to also take a picture of it. But within Michigan and Michigan's immunization information system, they actually have a reminder system built in. So I know Michigan is actually looking at a mechanism to be able to text people as a reminder for their vaccines. Now, each state or jurisdiction will do it a little bit differently.
So since it is being done, by state jurisdiction, it's not actually a federal type activity. Does that mean when someone travels and leaves their state to go somewhere, will they be required to take their card with them to be able to prove that they've had their vaccination?
So that's a great question, and we've actually been asked that right now. So I'm sure that's going to be something coming down the line. We just don't know what each one of the states are going to mandate, how that's going to be. I did hear on one of the airlines, I think it was Australian Airlines, that they're actually going to have people have to be vaccinated and be able to show something. So will it come to that? Possibly, but I don't think in the near term, and here's why. Because under an emergency use authorization, military, healthcare providers, they can't be forced to take it. Some jobs where you're required to have a vaccine under an EUA, that simply isn't the case. So,
right.
I know for the military, for our soldiers, although most of them want to take it, they can't wait for their opportunity. That isn't the case. And so I think while it's under an emergency use, you may not see that mandate to have a vaccine card. I think it will be better. I think the airlines will probably go to that, and it's something that they'll encourage.
So I watched the 60 Minutes story with General Perna, such an amazing leader in our Army. And I enjoyed the question that said, what keeps you up at night? And General Perna replied that people won't take the vaccine. Can you talk to our audience today about why it's really, really important to take the vaccine, that it's safe, and where that's going to get us in the future?
Absolutely. And it's funny because we answered that same question the exact same way when 60 Minutes interviewed me. I gave them the exact same answer because it really is. we have the utmost confidence in the team that General Perna has assembled here. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the decision to take a vaccine is a very personal one. What I would ask people to do is be educated on the information. There's a lot of rhetoric out there, and anything new is always going to drive that. But I would say follow the data and the science. Listen to what the FDA has to say about it. Purposely and rightfully so, the FDA is an independent board. ACIP is an independent board. So what would I tell the American public? You have two independent boards that are looking at the data from a Pfizer or a Moderna or a Johnson & Johnson or an AstraZeneca vaccine before it would ever go into a single person's arm. Two different independent boards. So trust the science. Now, be armed with information. Ask the questions. How did warp speed go from an 84-month process down to a 15-month process? And ask those questions and be an informed consumer, and then make your own decision what works best for you. I will tell you that for myself and my family and the people here at Warp Speed, we can't wait to be in line. If I could go first and show the people of Michigan that it's safe, I would be honored to be able to do that. But I'm very proud of what we've done here. If I didn't believe in the vaccine and the vaccines and what this team was doing, I wouldn't be here, ma'am.
Well, I will tell you, Marion, if you're the first in line, I'd be happy to be the second one right behind you.
Thank you.
So let's talk about, there's going to be a priority of how the vaccines can be given. It's going to take a long time to get through all of the population. And I don't know if this is a question you can answer or if you heard from the experts, but I'm sure many people are going to want to know, what's the period of time it's going to take for this vaccination process until we can get back to a point of having large gatherings?
So I think it's going to be dependent on two things. It's going to be dependent on one, just kind of as you alluded to, how fast can we get the vaccine out? So if you listen to Dr. Slawi, who is the head of Warp Speed, from the vaccine perspective, we're anticipating by April, May, that anybody that wants to get a vaccine should be able to get it. Now that gets to the second point. Will everybody get it? And so getting back to normal is going to be a relative term because not everybody will choose to get the vaccine. And so it'll be a while before society gets back. But I am confident that by taking the vaccine and we're still going to have to do some protective things. Getting the vaccine is not going to eradicate it instantaneously. There's going to be a time. And so will we still have to wear our masks some after we get the vaccine? Absolutely. But I think you'll see the knee in the curve come very quickly after people are vaccinated. I know from my case, I've got a daughter getting married in a year, so certainly, I'm hoping, praying from a somewhat selfish perspective that we're back to a sense of normalcy.
Right, and we have this little event called the Mackinac Policy Conference that we're also hoping can take place next fall. So it's an interesting time right now. We are about to have a transition of the administration. And we know President-elect Biden is just now starting to get briefed on where everything is at. Do you think that there'll be any impact on Operation Warp Speed with the transition of an administration?
I do not, and that's from what we're seeing. I think this has been a great thing for the American public. We are working on a vaccine. We are working on the distribution of the vaccine, and as I've listened to President-elect Biden, he has talked about listening to the science and listening to the experts, and so I don't see any difference in what I think a new administration will bring. Interestingly enough, though, I'm not sure if you saw the article right across the border from you, Canada. So President Trudeau has kind of taken a page out of the Warp Speed playbook and put a 2-star general in charge of their distribution. So So that
Yes.
too gives me kind of a smile on our face that we're doing the right things, and continuity of operations will stay for the day.
Can you explain to our participants what the whole of America approach is?
Absolutely. So when you think of the whole of America approach, it is the government, so the CDC, uh, Department of Defense, Health and Human Services, but it's also bringing in industry. So FedEx, UPS, McKesson, who is the central contractor, companies like Amerisource Bergen, who are going to help distribute therapeutics, um, a company called Palantir, who is the creator of this great dashboard that we have called Tiberius. Um, and then, of course, academia. We couldn't do that with all of America. So if you think about it, and Tammy, back in our previous time when we were working on Michigan and the industry, the military industry, and thinking about just the same things we talked about then, it is bringing industry and academia and the military all together. It's actually the exact same approach that you and I talked about several years ago with General Gwen Bingham.
Yes. Yeah. So how long are you in this for? Does Operation Warp Speed stay together until all are vaccinated?
So that's what we don't know. So at some point there'll be a transition period. I know the new administration, I'm sure we'll talk about that. Um, the short answer is we're in it till we get the American public on a good path. We get vaccines rolling, and then we're asked to transition fully over to the Health and Human Service agencies, the different ones there. So for myself, um, I've told my family I'll see you when I see you.
Oh, I only ask that because I can't wait to get you back into the region to do the job that you do at TACOM.
Well, thank you.
Because you do such an amazing job, and we're very, very proud to have TACOM and GVSC in our backyard. We have only about another couple of minutes left, so I'd like to give you the time to talk about anything that I might not have answered or questioned you on that you think would be important for our participants to hear.
Okay, great. So Pfizer vaccine, it's ultra cold, and that's one of the things that people fear the most. It has to be stored at minus 80, which is minus 80 Celsius, which is minus 94 Fahrenheit. And people are concerned, well, if I don't have an ultra cold freezer, I can't get that vaccine. You can. So Pfizer has come up with a remarkable shipping box that the vaccine can actually be administered out of that box. We put dry ice in the box. You can refresh the dry ice every 5 days. And so if you think about that box in a 20-day cycle, we can refresh that dry ice 3 times. So that's 15 days. And then the last 5 days, the vaccine can be stored in the refrigerator. So even if a site doesn't have an ultra cold freezer, it's not an impediment to them being able to get the Pfizer vaccine. So the other question we have is a Pfizer vaccine. Vaccine that cold, you're gonna inject frozen stuff into my arm? No, we're not. So the vaccine thaws. It thaws very quickly, within 30 minutes to 2 hours, and then it is mixed with what's called a diluent, a saline solution, and then it is ready to administer very, very quickly. So I think those would be the two biggest things. Is if you could tell the people of Michigan, don't be afraid of the ultra cold vaccine. We do have some people that say, I just not sure we can handle it. Um, we have thought about this every step of the way, even with the dry ice. So one of the things the United States government has committed to is if you're going to vaccinate out of that box, we're going to provide that first refresh of dry ice. So if a box is delivered to a clinic in Trenton, Michigan, where I live, then within 24 hours, that refresh of dry ice will be provided to the site along with dry ice gloves, goggles, and a face shield. So we've tried to think of just about everything we can to enable that vaccine, which is a great vaccine, to overcome people's fears about it.
Well, Marion, you have provided us with so much good information today, and I know you're just waiting for that day that you can jump into action. and actually start to execute Operation Warp Speed. And I see that coming soon. I hope maybe at a later time we can have you back and you can give us a progress report on how it's going. But doing an amazing job. We're very proud to have you there. And we wish you the best of luck as you get ready to execute.
Okay, thank you. And to the people of Michigan, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'm thinking about you guys every day that we're out here. You know, that's the goal, is to, you know, from a state perspective and a national perspective, just to get people back to a sense of normalcy, Tammy, as you mentioned. That's really what drives all of us each day. And while we're anxious to get back to our jobs and our lives, we won't come back home until this mission is done.
Thank you very much for that, Marion. And to all of our participants, thank you for joining us today. And I hope you will go out and share the information that you heard today, and especially what you heard from Marion about it's safe. We need to be safe. Let's encourage our friends, our family, those we know, that this vaccine is very, very important if we're going to get ahead of this pandemic. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.